I'm Norah O'Donnell, and this is Person to Person. Our guest today, Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart is an award-winning comedian and writer. As the host of The Daily Show with Jon Stewart for over 16 years, he won 22 Emmys, 5 Peabody Awards, and 2 Grammys. Now he has a new show on Apple TV+, The Problem with Jon Stewart. Stewart is a longtime champion for 9/11 first responders, and now he's advocating for veterans who are exposed to toxic burn pits. Stewart also hosts the Warrior Games, a competition across the U.S. military that brings together wounded service members, and he joins us from New Jersey for an intimate person-to-person conversation ahead of this year's games. Jon Stewart, welcome to Person. It is so good to see you. How are you?
I'm very well, Nora. Thank you so much for having me. Much appreciated.
And congratulations on the Emmy nominations for your new show on Apple TV+. How's it going?
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's great. We have an incredible executive producer. I don't know if you are aware of her. Her name is Brenda Adishkari. She's been trained remarkably well. She's a veteran of the news industry, the business.
The CBS Evening News. Yeah, many people don't know that Brenda, who used to run the CBS Evening News, now works with Jon Stewart.
Yes, that's right. Stolen from the grasp of CBS News.
So it's working out well. It's done the show well, right? I mean, you guys have had a great season.
She's awesome. It's been a blast. You know, it's been fun for me because it's a little bit of shaking the rust off, a little bit of like, wait, where's the camera again? I've really, taken these sort of deeper dives into some of these issues has just been fascinating. I think the stock market show, was the one where the complexity of it so blew our minds as to, here's the heart of American capitalism, and it's the most sort of oddly conflict of interest, monopolistic, complex middlemen, so it's been quite an education, but we're enjoying ourselves.
Yeah, so how do you decide what to do each show on? Because the show's called The Problem with Jon Stewart.
So almost like everything you guys do, I would imagine, you sit around and somebody goes, hey, I read this thing it's called payment for order flow. And it turns out that all these retail investors who are investing through Robinhood, actually their orders are being bought by a company called Citadel and taken offline and anytime somebody spins a tale that grabs your attention or there's a certain absurdity or contradiction in it, or when we did the episode on burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan and what it was doing to the veterans community, it was just something that I had known about through Burn Pits 360 and a group that I was working with. So it's things, I think we always look for something visceral that seems like a conversation that's kind of gotten caught in the redundancy and noise of the machine that you and I are both a part of, and trying to find a way to grab some clarity through it is really the mantra, I guess.
Yeah, I think one of the most important lessons I've received from a producer, Adam Verdugo, who's currently our executive producer, he always says to me, follow your curiosity.
Yeah, man. If you're not interested in it, how can the audience possibly be interested in it? You don't want it to be rote. And there are those moments, I can remember on The Daily Show, there were moments where I knew, like, oh, we're putting out a comedy-like substance today. Not every day you're going to have the same inspiration and curiosity and care that you might have for everything. So you really want to look for things that are actually kind of grabbing your heart and really interesting.
Something that has grabbed your heart and that you have advocated on behalf of or the 9/11 victims, law enforcement officials and others who suffered after 9/11. And what you've achieved has got to be probably one of your proudest moments of your career, what you've achieved for them.
Well, I've also won a Cable Ace Award. So, it's, we got a neck and neck situation right here. Obviously, being able to be a part of that community being able to in some way repay the debt of those whose courage and tenacity that day were so incredible has been an incredible experience. And it's led me to these other issues and people.
So you can draw a direct line from advocating for 9/11 responders and then for our veterans, and certainly what many of them have experienced through burn pits, which I still don't think is part of the national conversation in a way that many people will say, what?
No.
What's going on with burn pits? What happened to them?
Sure. I mean, look, Ground Zero was in many ways the original burn pit. It was all the materials basically of a single city block covered in jet fuel and burned for days while our first responders and people that lived in the area breathed in all those fumes. And we saw the devastating effects that those kinds of toxins had. Well, if you served in Iraq or Afghanistan, chances are you slept next to one of those. And it was a pit that they deposited everything that an army can possibly produce, from human waste to medical waste to human body parts to armaments to all kinds of other things, with kerosene or diesel or jet fuel. And these things burned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Not because it was necessary to, but because incinerators are slightly more expensive, and the contractors, didn't want to have any part of that. And they've suffered, as our veterans have suffered in every war. Toxic exposure, for some reason, toxic wounds have never been viewed as wounds. Toxic exposure has always been somehow pushed aside. I mean, we're all standing on the shoulders of Vietnam veterans. If Vietnam veterans hadn't fought the way they had to try and get coverage for the diseases that they were suffering based on their Agent Orange exposure, we would never be in the place we are, where we've almost got this really historic Toxic Exposure Act on the precipice of getting signed into law. But, the Vietnam veterans were the OGs on this. They were the ones that, and by the way, are still fighting for certain benefits. But Persian Gulf War veterans, anybody that serves, you got guys sitting in Humvees next to depleted uranium. We just haven't done a good job of recognizing the total cost of our, military adventures.
John, I have covered President Biden for many years. I've interviewed him. I used to cover the Senate. I covered him as vice president. I knew about his son, Bo, serving in Iraq and then dying of brain cancer. But it really wasn't only until the past year or two that I learned that President Biden believes that burn pits may have caused his son's brain cancer. And then, of course, President Biden brought it up at the State of the Union address. And now, as you point out, we're on the precipice of this major legislation passing. What will it do? What final step has to be taken in order to make it into law?
A toxic wound is an IED that goes off in your body 6 to 9 to 10 years later. Everybody's immune system is different. So you may develop a glioblastoma from 6 months exposure. You may develop it from a 3-week exposure, and it may not present itself for 5 years or 7 years. Unfortunately, people think veterans get health care for life. They don't. And so they have to go then to the VA and prove that their illness is related to their service. So they basically are cancer-ridden, or they have an immunological, or they have chronic bronchiolitis, something that really affects their function, maybe even their, mortality in the moment. And they've got to become their own doctor, lawyer, advocate, scientist. And the pressure on their families, who've now lost income because their veteran is disabled, creates all kinds of then mental stresses, which can lead to the suicide problem that exists today in the veterans community. I mean, it's complex and it's wrapped up. The bottom line of it is, this turns the VA into an advocate rather than an adversary. It makes the VA not act like an insurance company. It presumes if you served, it presumes an exposure, and therefore there's a list of diseases that we know are caused by these exposures. and you'll be granted your health care and whatever disability rating may come along with that.
You know, as someone who grew up in a military family and my sister serves and has been deployed, I grew up with the value that a country proves its worth by how they take care of their veterans. But that's because I'm from a military
Yes,
family.
ma'am.
But we send men and women to die for our country. They do it selflessly. And so what they deserve is us taking care of them, and at the very least, providing them the health care that they certainly deserve from their service. So
They lived up to the agreement. They lived up to their end of the bargain. You fought for the country, and the country has to hold up its agreement to you. This is the cost of war. You don't penalize veterans for your budgeting error.
All right, more with Jon Stewart when we come back. We'll talk about his involvement in the Warrior Games. And we're back with Jon Stewart. It's so good to have you. And so I hear you're hosting the 2022 Warrior Games. Are you prepared?
Yes.
Are you ready?
No. I've done it. This is, I think, my fifth year or sixth year. We had to cancel it. The last two were canceled because of COVID. And I believe the one that I did previously before COVID, we did in Colorado Springs. And my friend DT, Israel Del Toro, made me jump out of a plane. And I really hesitate to think what they're going to do to me this year.
You don't know.
They take great pleasure. I will say this: the veterans community takes great pleasure in putting me in situations that I am physically incapable of, and then watching the results. They take great glee in watching me vomit. I really don't know why that is, but boy, it draws a crowd.
Well, that's important because we should bring attention to
Yes.
these things. It's great to see so many of our veterans who have been wounded in action to come back and compete in a really high-level way.
That's right. I think when you transition out of the Army or the Navy or the Air Force or any of these services, it's disorienting because your whole life has been kind of mission-oriented, and it's been all about the camaraderie of your unit and the team and the love you have for each other and the sacrifices that you'll make for each other. And so it's already isolating when you find yourself transitioning out of that. And then to be wounded or ill otherwise is even further isolating. And a lot of these service members feel like they lose themselves. And so finding these adaptive rehabilitation methods, whether it be swimming or cycling or shot put, archery, any of the shooting, brings them back into not just competition, not just athletics, but camaraderie, team, mission, and boy, it's something. It's something to watch, and seeing them go through seeded volleyball matches or wheelchair basketball or those kinds of things, and the level of competition, and seeing that warrior come back out in them. It's I really think these kinds of programs save lives. Find a way to reconnect with these folks and save their lives.
I agree with you. I do. I think they save lives. They remind people of their teammates and their courage and what they've done in the past. Have you played in some of these games?
Hell yeah. I believe I'm still bruised from a seated volleyball game that I played at SOCOM in Tampa, I think 3 years ago. Like I say, they're not shy about putting me through my paces.
Is there a goal for this year with the Warrior Games?
The goal is to get all the athletes together again. So much of what's gone on over the last 3 years, and we'll check in with the teams, on and off. And so much of the Warrior Games is teammates holding other teammates accountable to each other and getting everybody together again and reminding them that they're part of this larger family and this larger group, and holding each other accountable for someone who might be struggling or keeping an eye. It's eyes on everybody, and it's the first time we're able to get eyes on everybody in quite some time. So the goal is always that first and foremost. And secondly, it's to let the public in and to see this incredible demonstration of athletic competition and of skill and of tenacity and all those things that make it such a remarkable competition.
Well, Jon Stewart, it's been lovely to speak with you. And
lovely to speak with you, Norah.
No, and for all that you do, really, on behalf of first responders and our veterans. It's so noble, and I know it's so appreciated.
No, it is in no way that.
No.
It is,
well,
I get
humble,
a tremendous satisfaction from it, and they elevate me every time that I have the opportunity to be around them, and it has been my distinct, pleasure to be able to be a small part of it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Norah.
And when we come back, we'll speak with an athlete on Team Air Force competing in the games. Now on Person to Person, Senior Master Sergeant Benjamin Seekle. He represents Team Air Force in the Warrior Games. Sergeant Seekle joined the Air Force in 2004. In 2011, Sergeant Seekle and his patrol dog Charlie stepped on a landmine in Afghanistan. He lost his leg, but he and Charlie made a full recovery. Sergeant Seekle joins us now to talk about the games from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Sergeant, so good to see you. How did you get involved in the Warrior Games?
I got involved in the Warrior Games about 7 years ago. I got a call from a previous commander telling me about the Air Force Wounded Warrior program and some of the different benefits that it had and some things that I could get involved with the program, specifically with adaptive sports. And when he let me know, he told me I was going to be getting a phone call from some folks down there, and I stood by, and sure enough, 5 minutes later, the phone rang, and I was off to the races after that.
Do you mind sharing how you were injured?
I was wounded 11 years ago in Afghanistan. I was on a deployment as a military working dog handler, and while outside the wire on a patrol, I was wounded in an explosion, and that experience was quite unlike anything I'd experienced ever in my life or ever since. All the things that you expect or imagine would happen when you sign up to serve your country, you don't think about all the things, all the bad things that could happen. But on that day, it was just a hazard of the profession, as I fondly like to call it. I think we all know what we're there to do. And that day, I just happened to be in a situation where the risks were stacked against me. I started thinking about what my next steps were. How do I get out of this situation? Where is all my equipment? Where's my dog? I had my dog Charlie with me at the time, and he was no longer next to me.
What has being part of the Warrior Games meant to you?
The Warrior Games, quite honestly, and the Air Force Wounded Warrior program as a whole, has really changed my life and kind of shaped my outlook on what is possible. I think for a while I was trying to figure it out on my own, which can be difficult, especially when you don't know the right things to do or you don't know what the future may hold. I was outside of the collective. I didn't have a network. I just had me, and I am a fallible human being, as are the rest of us. But really being brought into that fold and being shown like, hey, we have the Wounded Warrior program, we have adaptive sports, we have the Warrior Games. It was this entire collective of folks that were going through a lot of the same things that I was going through. And it was when I started going through that and trying to better myself that I realized that I wasn't alone. And that was a huge burden lifted off of me, knowing that I had brothers and sisters going through the same things that I was going through, and that there was a way out and forward.
What does it mean to have someone like Jon Stewart as part of the Warrior Games?
Jon's been a part of the program for as long as I think I've been in it, just supporting the program, being there for the folks. I think really what it is about awareness, and someone like Jon bringing, his passion for us warriors and what we go through and what we have as an example to the American people. I think him using his platform to shed light on the things that we've been able to accomplish. It's hard to do that on your own. I think certain people are in the right position at the right time to spread that awareness that folks that have been through trauma and really show that we are not a class of folks that are beaten or downtrodden or incapable. But he's been able to cast a light on the possibilities and what we as people are capable of. Not just as wounded or disabled veterans, but human beings that have so much potential and so much ability that we ourselves don't even realize.
Well, Sergeant Segal, thank you for your service to our country, and good luck at the Warrior Games.
Absolutely, Norah. We'll definitely take everything that we got, everything that we've learned, and all of the skills that we have, and put it on the field of competition.
Will do. Of course, I'm from an Army family, but I still wish you good luck.
Now, you'll be okay. My thoughts and prayers are with you and the family.
Take care.